So, my 26th wife called her M cheated on me, 27M, with a friend of mine, 27M, call him J for the story's sake, a bit of backstory. We met when I was 22 at another friend's wedding. She was a good friend of the bride and I, the groom, and they sat us at that table so we would get together. When I first seen her, I was completely taken back by how beautiful she was, and when she sat down and we began to talk, we found out we had a lot of things in common. We clicked instantly. We talked for a while, ate the dinner, and took to the dance floor. We danced and drank through the night. We ended up kissing in the middle of the dance floor, and when we pulled away, our friends, the bride and groom, came up to us and asked what was up between us, though we're really excited to play matchmaker. We just shrugged it off and carried on with our night. We left not exchanging numbers, but about a week later I got a text from her asking me out. The bride gave her my number. I of course said yes, and it turned into a relationship. The relationship was great. Other than small arguments, we never really fought, and it was never anything really serious. I eventually asked her to marry me about 2 years into us dating, and we were married less than a year later. We were married for a little more than a year when it all came crashing down on me. Just before our first anniversary, there were little things that were irritating me. She became more guarded of her phone, girls' nights became more frequent, and our sex life was almost non-existent. I had brought this up on multiple occasions but was brushed off, and I'm letting my insecurities get to me. She would continue go on as if what I felt and tried to communicate didn't matter to her, so I became colder and colder. I stopped giving her a goodbye kiss as I leave for work, and unless it was something important, we hardly spoke. One night while she slept, I took her phone and laptop and skimmed through her texts, emails and messenger apps and found nothing. And from reading stories on here, I checked her car. I grabbed her keys and looked in her car and found a second phone. I knew in that instant what was going on. But I wanted all the evidence for when I called her out. I didn't want her to say something like it had only happened once or anything stupid like that. I looked through the phone and found only one number I read, though every message I connected the phone to my computer and printed out every message and every photo and spent the night researching divorce lawyers. I spent hours of my day in my home office reading bios of lawyers and found one that I liked and emailed him, but as it was a Saturday, he wasn't in the office. I then wanted to know who the guy was. So I grabbed my phone, typed the number I wanted to call and pretend I'm Spectrum because who doesn't have Spectrum? But Jay's contact popped up. It took me a minute to put 2 and 2 together, but when I did, I blew up. I was yelling and cursing in my office, and my wife opened the door to check on me. But when I see her, I told her to get the F out. She closed the door and went to our room. I had never cursed at my wife or raised my voice above a normal volume. All of day, I never left my office. I was just silently raging, just glaring at the wall. I called one of my friends, groom from the wedding, and tell him I need to go for a drink, and ask if he'll come with me. He must have heard something in my voice because he asked if I was okay. I told him I wasn't, and I really need to drink. So without word, I took all the printouts and left to go to the bar. I arrived first, ordered 4 shots of Jack and a beer. I was on my last shot when my friend, call him T, arrived and asked what's going on. I told him straight out M's cheating. He gave me sympathy, and I asked if he wanted to know with who and told him it was Jay. He became visibly irritated. He was the one that introduced me to Jay, and all he could say was I'm sorry over and over. Jay and I were never super close. We wouldn't ask one another to hang out, but if we see each other at a get-together, we were friendly. I told T don't mention this to anyone as I had just found out, and I haven't even spoken to M or a lawyer yet. I asked him not to tell his wife, and if she asked what was wrong with me to say I'm having problems at work, he agreed. We drank and talked for most of the night. Then I called an Uber and went home around 3 a.m. It was the first time I looked at my phone since I called T, and there was missed calls. A bunch of texts, all from M asking me where I was when I'd be home and if I was okay. I got home when she was asleep on the couch. I just walked up to our bedroom and went to sleep. I woke up with her in the bed, so I got dressed and left the house. I went to go pick up my car and go to my office and buried myself in work for the day and went back home around 10 p.m. To my surprise, my wife was there to greet me, and she told me she had made me dinner. She asked if I wanted her to heat it up. I told her no and went to bed. She followed soon after asking what's been wrong with me. I told her to leave me alone and that I wanted to sleep. She kept pestering me. Eventually, I snapped and yelled, "Stop, I am trying to sleep, go away." The next morning, I received an email from the lawyer asking to meet later in the day, and I confirmed and got ready for my day. I went downstairs to leave, and M had made breakfast asking to talk. I made a small plate and sat down. She started by saying I've been acting different and going on and on about how I changed, and she wants to know why I told her work has been stressful, and soon it would be all over. I finished up and told her I got to go. I went to my office and counted down the minutes to go meet the lawyer. When I left, I told my assistant I'm going out to lunch with a client. My wife would call my work sometimes. I left. The meeting with the lawyer went well, and I handed over all I had gathered on her, and the lawyer had told me, "Well, I'm sorry for all that's going on, but I'm happy you gathered all this information. You see, we live in an at-fault state, so your wife has no claim on most of your money." I told him I didn't even think about that. I was just thinking I've got to divorce her as soon as possible. He asked to keep the evidence, but I told him I prefer you to just make copies, as I haven't told my wife I knew yet. And I don't want to hear her excuses. He agreed and had his assistant make copies. I asked when she will be served with papers. He told me about 2 weeks. I then thanked him and left. I went home to confront my wife. When I arrived, she wasn't home, so I called her. No answer. Called again. No answer. I texted her, "I don't give a f. If you're writing Jay right now, get home. We need to talk low." And behold, she calls me not a minute later asking what I was talking about. All I told her was get home now. She arrives about 15 minutes later, and I said to her, "Wow, look at that 15 minutes. That's about the same distance between here and G's, isn't it?" She looked at me dumbfounded. I gave her a minute to gather herself, but she was just looking at me. And I said, "Well, nothing to say." She tried to deny and gaslight me, and I let her continue on. She worked herself up and started to insult me. I slammed my fist on the table to shut her up and pulled out the evidence at first and showed it from the side and said, "Look at this mountain of things I gathered on you." Then I showed her each printout at a time. She then tells me to stop and started to cry. She tried to apologize and tells me she loved me. I said, "Honey, what happened to that energy you had before? You were so adamant on degrading and insulting me just a minute ago." She tried to hug me and tell me how sorry she is. I put my hand out and told her, "Don't touch me." She says, "Well, go to the bedroom and do whatever I like." I looked her deep in her eyes and told her, "Sweetheart, I will never touch you again. Do you want to know who else has these photos and messages? My lawyer. I'm divorcing you now. Get a bag, gather your clothes, and get the F out of my house." That was 3 days ago when I haven't heard from her.